Imagine surviving a shipwreck in the freezing ocean, with nothing but a piece of wood, a silent sky, and a loyal German shepherd refusing to leave your side. Now imagine waking up on a deserted island, no rescue in sight, no food, no shelter, just the sound of waves and the fear that today might be your last. Days later, they found another survivor, a woman who gave up her seat on the lifeboat, a billionaire who risked her life to save children she didn't even know. 3 strangers, one deadly island, storms, hunger, wild animals, and a bond so powerful it felt like a miracle God placed in their path. What happened on that island changed their lives forever, and the final twist will leave you speechless. Before we begin this unbelievable journey, please hit subscribe, drop a comment, and share this story with someone who believes in miracles. Thank you so much for watching. Let's step into the story. The early winter sky over Seattle, Washington, hung low and heavy, a thick gray ceiling pressing down on the waterfront. Gusts of icy wind swept through the harbor, carrying the damp chill of the Pacific and rattling the metal railings along the docks. The waves churned violently against the concrete barriers, their rhythm loud and unforgiving, an omen of how harsh the season would soon become. Even the gulls seemed reluctant to fly, preferring to huddle along the edges of the cruise terminal, their feathers puffed up against the cold. It was in this stark, biting weather that Ethan Walker arrived, a 34-year-old former Marine whose very posture betrayed years of discipline. He stood tall, broad-shouldered, and powerfully built, the kind of man whose presence made others instinctively move aside. His hair was clipped short in military fashion, though a few strands had grown long enough to fall over his forehead. His jawline was angular, covered in a day's worth of rugged stubble, while a faint scar ran from his left cheekbone to the edge of his jaw, a permanent reminder of a deployment gone wrong. His eyes, a piercing steel blue, carried a quiet heaviness, the weight of someone who had seen far too much and survived even more. Beside him walked Rex, his loyal German shepherd, 5 years old with a thick tan and black coat and powerful legs built for speed and endurance. Rex's ears stood alert at all times, swiveling toward every distant clang and echo on the dock. His amber eyes were sharp, intelligent, and full of awareness, though they softened whenever they glanced up at Ethan. He wore a worn but well-maintained military-grade harness, the faded patches still hinting at missions long past. Rex's gait was confident and steady, his body always angled slightly toward Ethan, as if ready to shield him from threats that others could not see. For Ethan, Rex was more than a companion. He was the reason Ethan was still alive. Years earlier, during a deployment in the Middle East, Rex had sensed an improvised explosive device seconds before it detonated. He lunged at Ethan, pushing him behind a concrete barrier, saving him from the blast that left the scar on his face. From that day on, Ethan vowed never to abandon Rex, no matter the circumstance. After receiving his honorable discharge, Ethan found civilian life strange, too quiet, too slow, and yet too loud with memories he couldn't shut off. He hoped that a few weeks on an Alaskan cruise, traveling through icy fjords and quiet wilderness, would help him regain a sense of calm. A break before returning to his small wooden cabin in Montana, where he planned to start fresh. The cruise ship loomed ahead, massive and pristine white, its decks bustling with families, retirees, young couples, and camera-wielding adventurers. The air was full of chatter, the click of rolling suitcases, and the shrill calls of harbor workers coordinating the final preparations. As Ethan approached the gangway, several elderly passengers noticed Rex and instantly brightened. One of them, a petite woman bundled in a violet wool coat, stepped forward with a warm smile. She was Mrs. Howard, around 70, with soft hazel eyes behind thick glasses, silver hair pinned neatly, and deep, gentle smile lines etched into her pale face. "Oh my," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "What a handsome boy you have there." Rex approached her calmly, tail wagging in slow, friendly arcs. He dipped his head slightly, allowing her to scratch behind his ears. Ethan couldn't help the ghost of a smile. "He likes gentle people," he said. Mrs. Howard chuckled. "Dogs always know. They always do." As Ethan continued up the ramp, another crew member, John Myers, a middle-aged dock worker with sun-beaten skin, a scruffy brown beard, and a tired but friendly expression, checked his boarding pass. John was the kind of man shaped by years of manual labor. Strong forearms, calloused hands, and a slight limp earned from a loading accident he mentioned casually. "Welcome aboard," John said, nodding toward Rex. "Glad they allow service dogs. He looks like he means business." "He does," Ethan replied. "But he's off duty this trip." John chuckled, scanning the harness. "Doesn't look like he knows that." Rex responded with a single alert woof, as if confirming it. Ethan patted Rex's neck. "He's still adjusting." When they stepped onto the ship, the warm interior air enveloped them, smelling faintly of polished wood, coffee, and the salt carried from the open sea. Ethan led Rex toward the main deck. The open expanse of sky and the rolling waves always soothed him, and Rex seemed to sense his mood, staying close but relaxed. Ethan settled on a bench near the railing, Rex's head resting contentedly on his knee. Snowflakes drifted from the clouds, landing on Rex's fur, where they melted quickly. Ethan rubbed behind Rex's ears, his voice low and soft. "We're just here to rest, buddy. No missions, no chaos, just you and me." Rex licked his hand once, a gentle reassurance. For a brief moment, Ethan felt something almost like peace. He watched the cranes move containers, watched passengers wave their last goodbyes, watched the city fade behind the slow thickening of snow. The ship's horn echoed across the harbor, deep and resonant, and the vessel began to pull away from the dock. But Rex's ears suddenly pricked forward, rigid and alert. His muscles tensed under Ethan's hand. "What is it?" Ethan whispered. Rex didn't bark, but he let out a low growl, short, quiet, controlled, a warning he only used when something felt off. Ethan looked out across the water, but everything appeared normal. The waves, the snow, the distant coastline. Still, he trusted Rex's instincts more than he trusted his own. "Stay close," Ethan murmured. The dog shifted slightly, positioning himself between Ethan and the railing, eyes scanning the horizon with military precision. Ethan's peace had lasted only seconds. He didn't know that this was the beginning of something far bigger, something that would test him, Rex, and everyone aboard the ship in ways none of them could imagine. The fateful voyage had only just begun. Night settled over the ship like a heavy curtain, blotting out the horizon and leaving only the rhythmic hum of the engines and the faint creak of metal as the vessel pushed deeper into northern waters. Snow had begun to fall in fine, icy flakes that tapped softly against the cabin windows. Ethan Walker, exhausted from the long day of travel and the emotional weight he carried everywhere he went, lay stretched out on the small bed of his cabin. Rex slept curled at his feet, his breathing slow and steady, at least until something disturbed that fragile calm. Rex's ears shot up first, his muscles stiffened. A low, warning growl escaped his throat, vibrating through the dim room like a muted alarm. Before Ethan could fully wake, Rex leapt off the bed and padded to the door, tapping it twice with his front paw, a signal he had been trained to give when danger was near. Ethan sat up instantly. His instincts, long honed by military service, sharpened to a point. He swung his legs off the bed and placed a steadying hand on Rex's back. "What is it, boy?" he whispered. Rex didn't look back. He simply remained focused on the door, the growl deepening. Ethan felt something he hated, an echo of dread stirring in his chest. He opened the door and was met with a faint vibration under his feet, a subtle tremor running along the length of the hallway. Something was wrong. He grabbed his jacket, and Rex moved beside him, pressed close but ready for anything. They made their way toward the upper deck, where cold air slashed across their faces the moment they stepped outside. The deck lights revealed several crew members rushing toward the lower maintenance access hatch. One of them, Mark Jensen, a young deckhand no older than 24, caught Ethan's eye. Mark had a wiry build, pale wind-burned skin, and a mop of reddish hair peeking from under his beanie. His freckled face twisted with unease as he lifted the hatch. Mark was known among the crew as kind-hearted, but easily shaken. He had once confessed to a passenger that he only took the job to pay off medical bills for his younger sister. But now his usual timid demeanor was replaced with grim urgency. "We heard something from below," Mark said to another worker, his voice tight. A metallic screech, like something scraped the hull. Rex positioned himself in front of Ethan, blocking one rushing crewman who almost collided with them. The dog's presence alone made the man step back and mutter an apology before continuing toward the hatch. Ethan knelt briefly beside Rex, running his hand along the dog's tense shoulders. "Easy," he murmured. "We'll figure it out." Another creak groaned through the ship, louder this time, long and metallic, like steel being dragged across stone. Mark flinched. Even Rex bared his teeth slightly, scanning every shadow. Within minutes, more crew members appeared, including a tall engineer named Leo Turner. Leo was in his late 40s, with a square jaw, thick gray beard, and deep-set brown eyes that carried the exhaustion of someone who had spent decades working in engine rooms. A burn scar across his left forearm hinted at the roughness of his trade. His calm but commanding presence contrasted sharply with Mark's nervousness. Leo wiped sweat from his brow despite the cold. "We've got a problem," he muttered to no one in particular. "A big one." He descended the hatch and disappeared below deck. Ethan and Rex waited near the railing, the night air thick with tension. Nearly an hour passed before the ship's PA system crackled to life, followed by the gravelly voice of Captain Harris. Harris was an older man in his early 60s, tall and heavily built, with a neatly trimmed white beard and stern gray eyes. Decades at sea had carved lines across his tanned skin, lines shaped by storms, losses, and the weight of responsibility. Harris was widely respected among the crew for his steady leadership and his unbreakable adherence to maritime duty. "Attention all passengers," his voice boomed. "We have encountered damage to the lower hull. At this time, the situation is being assessed. Please remain calm and await further instruction." His tone was calm, but Ethan recognized something beneath it. Concern. Real concern. 2 hours later, the alarm sounded. The hallway erupted into chaos. Passengers stumbled out of their cabins, some crying, some shouting, some struggling to understand what was happening. The ship listed slightly to the side, a barely noticeable tilt, but enough to send panic rippling through the crowd. Rex instantly moved in front of Ethan, placing himself between his human and the frantic passengers. Several people brushed past them, but Rex held firm, barking once, deep and commanding, keeping a safe bubble around Ethan. A mother, clutching a toddler, nearly tripped in the rush. Ethan caught her by the arm. She introduced herself breathlessly as Carla Mercer, a young woman with tired brown eyes and dark curly hair pulled into a messy bun. Her thin frame and worn winter coat suggested she wasn't wealthy. Her expression suggested she wasn't used to relying on anyone's help. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. I didn't mean to. It's okay," Ethan replied, steadying her. "Stick close to the others." Rex sniffed the child gently before stepping aside. Moments later, Ethan felt the ship tilt again. A sharp clang echoed from below. Something was failing. He made a quick decision, one born of instinct. From his pack, he pulled a length of rope he always kept with him. With practiced hands, he looped one end around his own waist and fastened the other to Rex's harness. "No matter what," he whispered, tightening the knot. "I'm not losing you." Rex looked up at him, amber eyes steady, ears forward, and for a brief second the chaos faded. It was just man and dog, bonded by trauma, loyalty, and a promise forged years earlier. Rex pressed his head against Ethan's leg, a silent vow. "I'm here. Always." And then, somewhere below the ship, a loud, tearing sound split the night open. The tearing sound that split through the ship echoed like a monstrous roar from beneath the waves. Within seconds, alarms blared across the decks. The vessel lurched sharply to one side, sending passengers stumbling, grabbing for railings, crying out in panic. The lights flickered as the ship groaned under its own failing weight. Ethan felt the tilt immediately, his training screaming that the ship was seconds away from losing stability. Rex's claws scraped across the metal floor as he struggled to maintain footing, his growl rising from low caution to urgent alarm. "Rex, stay with me!" Ethan shouted as he grabbed the dog's harness. He pushed past the panicking crowd, making his way toward the starboard railing. People surged toward the lifeboats in frantic waves. Crew members attempted to control the chaos, including a woman Ethan had not noticed before, a crew officer named Sarah Whitfield. Sarah was in her late 30s, with sharp cheekbones, pale skin flushed from exertion, and long, dark hair tied tightly in a braid that whipped behind her. Her uniform clung to her slender but strong frame as she fought to keep the crowd organized. Her gray-green eyes flashed with fierce determination, revealing a woman who had been through hardship before, likely the kind that carved resilience into the bones. Ethan heard her shouting directions, her voice carrying over the storm of panic. "Children first. Women and elderly next. Keep the line moving." Her authority cut through fear like a blade, but even she couldn't stop the chaos completely. Through the madness, Ethan spotted another figure. 3 children crying near a lifeboat, clinging to a tall, elderly man who seemed overwhelmed. Their tiny winter coats shook with fear, their cheeks red from the cold wind. Before Ethan could decide whether to help them, a woman stepped into his view. She moved gracefully yet urgently, pushing aside her own chance at safety as she pulled the children forward. She was Olivia Bennett. Ethan had only seen glimpses of her on the ship earlier, a tall, elegant woman in her early 30s with long blonde hair that fell in loose waves, pale skin naturally luminous, and striking green eyes that carried both strength and gentleness. Now, under the deck's emergency lights, she looked even more composed than many crew members. Despite the chaos, She guided the children toward the lifeboat, reassuring them with a steady voice. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're going to be safe. Go on, climb in." Her hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from urgency. She turned to the crewman lowering the lifeboat. "There are more children inside. Take them first. I'll wait." "Ma'am, we don't have time." "Then make time," she snapped, her eyes blazing with moral resolve. Ethan watched her step back, away from the lifeboat, willingly giving up her place for 3 trembling strangers. Something about that selflessness carved itself into Ethan's memory. A person who would do that was rare, and someone worth protecting. But then the ship lurched violently. The railing beside Ethan groaned. Passengers screamed as water surged over the lower deck. The crew shouted for anyone still on board to brace themselves. Olivia lost her footing, stumbling toward the edge. Before she could fall, Sarah Whitfield caught her arm, yanking her upright. "We have to go," Sarah yelled. "We're out of time." But Ethan already knew what needed to be done. The lifeboats were nearly full. The last few were overloaded. There was no chance he and Rex could board without risking others. He glanced at Rex, who stared back with fierce loyalty, trembling but unyielding. Ethan reached down, tightening the rope that bound them together. "All right, buddy," he whispered. "We jump together." With one final breath, he vaulted over the rail. Rex leapt beside him, the rope taut between them as their bodies plunged into the black, freezing water. The ocean struck like a wall of knives. Ethan's breath was stolen instantly, his muscles locking in shock. Rex flailed beside him for a moment before instinct kicked in. His powerful legs churned the icy water, trying to keep afloat. Ethan fought through the numbness, grabbing a floating wooden panel likely torn from the ship's interior. He pulled Rex toward it, lifting the dog's upper body onto the plank, while keeping his own torso submerged to balance their weight. "Stay with me, boy," he gasped, his lips already turning blue. Rex's teeth chattered as icy water dripped from his dark snout. His amber eyes remained locked on Ethan, refusing to close even as the cold seeped into his bones. Ethan ran a trembling hand over Rex's head, rubbing behind his ears, the one place that always calmed him. "Don't fall asleep," Ethan said, his voice harsh with desperation. "You sleep, you die. You hear me?" Rex whimpered softly, but stayed awake. Hours blurred together as darkness swallowed everything. The ship was long gone. The screams had faded. Only the wind, the water, and their ragged breaths remained. Ethan kept one arm hooked around the plank and the other on Rex, clinging to consciousness through sheer will. And Rex, even freezing, never once broke eye contact. It was as if they held each other alive through nothing more than loyalty and love forged in battle. The night stretched endlessly, but Ethan kept whispering, "Stay with me, Rex. Stay awake. Stay alive." And Rex did. The first thing Ethan felt was warmth. Not comforting warmth, but the rough, abrasive heat of the sun hitting skin that had been cold for far too long. He blinked against the brightness, the world blurring in and out like a slowly focusing lens. Sand clung to his cheek. The scent of salt, kelp, and wet earth filled his lungs with every rasping breath. A low whine sounded close beside him. Rex. The German shepherd lay curled against Ethan's shoulder, his fur matted with seawater and grit. His sides rose and fell in fast, shallow breaths, his body trembling from exhaustion, but his amber eyes still open, still alert, still watching Ethan. Even half frozen and barely conscious, Rex hadn't taken his gaze off him. Ethan swallowed hard, emotion tightening his throat. Good boy. You stayed with me. You always stay. Rex lifted his head slightly, giving a weak thump of his tail against the sand. It took several minutes before Ethan gathered enough strength to sit up. His muscles protested, sore and stiff from hours in the freezing ocean. When he looked around, he saw the jagged coastline of an unknown island, dense pines rising behind the beach, rocky outcroppings jutting into the sea, and no signs of human life anywhere. Only gulls circled above, crying their sharp, lonely calls. He checked Rex first, running a steady hand along the dog's body. Rex was cold, but responsive, the tension in his muscles telling Ethan he was still ready to defend at a moment's notice. "We made it," Ethan whispered. "Somehow, we made it." They needed water, shelter, fire, survival instincts, buried under the civilian life Ethan had tried to build, rose sharply back to the surface. He stood shakily and gestured for Rex to follow. The dog forced himself up on unsteady legs, shook sand from his fur, and positioned himself slightly ahead of Ethan, taking the familiar lead he used on patrols. His head stayed low, nose testing every scent. The interior of the island was a mix of dense forest and narrow streams carving through layers of moss-covered stone. They followed one such stream in hopes of finding fresh water. The water trickled over smooth pebbles, clear and cold. Ethan cupped his hands and drank carefully, letting Rex lap directly from the stream once he confirmed it tasted right. As they moved along the edge of the forest, Rex suddenly froze. His fur bristled, tail stiff, ears high. He let out a sharp bark, one that signaled threat. Ethan's heart lurched. He sprinted toward the sound, shoving through ferns and low branches, until he skidded to a halt on a flat patch of rock near the waterline. A woman lay there unmoving. Olivia Bennett. Her long blonde hair was tangled with seaweed, her skin pale beneath scrapes and bruises. Cuts traced down her arms, her clothes torn from the waves. Her face, usually composed and elegant, looked fragile in unconscious stillness. Rex positioned himself between her and a small, wild creature, a fox with mottled brown fur, thin from winter hunger, and sharp yellow eyes. It pawed cautiously toward Olivia, tempted by the unfamiliar presence on its territory. Rex's growl rumbled deep in his chest, a warning backed by muscle and instinct. The fox hesitated, but did not retreat. Ethan stepped forward, grabbed a piece of driftwood, and slammed it against a rock. The loud crack sent the fox bolting into the trees. He dropped immediately to Olivia's side. He checked her pulse, weak but steady. Relief washed through him. She's alive. Gently, he lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her slender frame weakened by the ordeal. Her head rested against his shoulder, and for a moment, Ethan felt a rush of unexpected protectiveness. Rex stayed glued to his side, keeping watch as Ethan carried Olivia back toward the beach. The sun was beginning to dip, painting the sky in streaks of gold and crimson, signaling that night would soon bring its own dangers. Ethan found a sheltered alcove between boulders, just enough space to shield them from wind. He gathered driftwood and dry seagrass, striking stones together until sparks caught. Rex lay close, lending his body heat as Ethan tended Olivia's wounds. He cleaned the cuts with fresh water, tore strips from his undershirt to bandage them, and wrapped his jacket around her. When the fire finally flickered alive, Ethan settled Olivia near the warmth. Rex curled up beside them, pressing his side toward her, instinctively offering heat to the weaker member of their small, accidental pack. Hours passed. The stars emerged overhead, scattered across the sky like shards of ice. The fire crackled softly. Ethan's eyes grew heavy, but he refused to sleep until he was sure Olivia was safe. Just past midnight, she stirred. Her lashes fluttered. Her voice came out hoarse and small. "Where am I?" "On an island," Ethan answered quietly. "We survived. Rex found you." Her gaze drifted to the dog, who lifted his head and gave a soft chuff before resting it gently against her leg. A faint smile touched her lips. "Thank you. Both of you." Ethan looked at the fire, letting the crackle fill the silence. "We'll get through this, but tonight, we rest." And there, under the cold Alaskan stars, the three of them stayed together. One soldier, one survivor, and one devoted German shepherd, bound by fate on a deserted island that would test them all. Morning light spilled gently over the island, filtering through tall pines and scattering gold across the sand. Each day since washing ashore had begun the same way. Ethan waking early to check their surroundings, Rex stretching stiffly before trotting ahead to scout, and Olivia stirring more slowly as her injuries healed. The island's rhythm was beginning to shape their survival. It wasn't comfort, but it was a routine that kept hope afloat. At first, Olivia kept a cautious distance from Rex. His large frame, muscular legs, broad chest, and sharp ears that twitched at the slightest sound felt intimidating when she was still weak. But it wasn't long before she learned who he truly was. The German shepherd never slept deeply. Each night, he positioned himself right at the entrance of their makeshift shelter, his amber eyes glowing faintly in the firelight as he watched the darkness for movement. His presence made Olivia's fear soften into gratitude. One morning, after drinking from the stream, Ethan decided it was time for Olivia to learn more than the basics. He stood beside her at the forest edge, a broken branch in his hands. "You need to know how to build fire from scratch," he said, his voice patient but firm. Ethan had always been like that, a calm leader shaped by years of service, someone who didn't waste words but never raised his voice either. His broad shoulders were steady as he demonstrated how to strip bark, how to gather dry moss, how to create small sparks with stones. Olivia watched closely. Her face, usually composed, marked by elegant features and bright green eyes, was now smudged with dirt and determination. Her blonde hair, tangled by sea salt, had been tied back with a torn strip from her shirt. She wasn't accustomed to hardship. She grew up in a world of polished boardrooms and private jets. But something about the island stripped away that outer shell, revealing someone resilient beneath it. While Ethan taught, Rex circled the perimeter. He moved with silent precision, nose sweeping low, tail slightly raised. Every few minutes he returned to Ethan and Olivia, nudging Ethan's leg to signal that all was clear before patrolling again. Ethan always understood him without words. "Good work," Ethan said when Olivia managed to coax a flame from the dry grass. She laughed, a soft, surprised sound, and wiped sweat from her forehead. "Didn't think I had it in me," she admitted. "You've got more in you than you think," Ethan replied. Afternoons were spent gathering food. Ethan identified edible plants, showing Olivia which leaves were safe and which berries to avoid. Olivia repeated his instructions carefully, though she occasionally wrinkled her nose at certain bitter-tasting roots. "This island doesn't believe in seasoning," she muttered, earning a soft bark from Rex as if he agreed. Despite the growing familiarity, the island was still dangerous. While climbing over rocks, one day, Olivia slipped. Her foot slid into a narrow crevice, and she cried out in pain. Before Ethan even turned, Rex had already reacted. The dog sprinted across the uneven ground with surprising agility, barking sharply to alert Ethan while grabbing the loose end of Olivia's scarf with his teeth to hold her steady. Ethan arrived seconds later, his face tense as he freed her carefully. Olivia clutched Rex tightly afterward, burying her face briefly into his fur. Her voice shook. "This dog, he's better than so many people I've known." Rex tilted his head, exhaled a warm breath, then licked the back of her hand. Ethan couldn't help but laugh, a deep, warm sound. "He doesn't trust easily," he said, "but if he chooses you, it means something." That evening, the fire crackled softly as the three sat close together. Olivia leaned against a smooth rock. Rex curled beside her with his head resting lightly on her knee, and Ethan sat opposite them, sharpening a piece of driftwood into a spear for protection. The glow of the flames revealed the softer lines of his face, lines worn not by age but by memories. Olivia watched him quietly. "You've been alone for a long time, haven't you?" Ethan didn't look up. "Rex and we've had each other. And now you have me too," she said gently. He met her gaze then, and something unspoken passed between them, something fragile, something growing. The days that followed blurred into a strange, shared existence. They built better shelter, stored food, and learned how to read the island together. The constant presence of danger forged something powerful among them: trust, care, a quiet, unexpected warmth. By the end of the week, they no longer felt like three strangers forced together by catastrophe. They felt like a small, makeshift family, bound not by blood, but by survival, loyalty, and a slowly blossoming affection that none of them could deny. The days on the island settled into a rhythm: sunrise tasks, afternoon foraging, evenings by the fire. But life in the wild was never predictable for long. Ethan sensed the change before Olivia did. Even Rex felt it. The air grew heavier, the wind colder, the ocean rougher. Seabirds shrieked overhead, abandoning their usual paths. Nature whispered warnings in every direction. By late afternoon, the sky had become a shifting wall of dark gray, layered with clouds so thick they swallowed the horizon. The wind gusts grew sharp and erratic, bending treetops and scattering loose sand along the beach. Ethan knew immediately what it meant. "A storm's coming. A big one," he said, his voice steady but urgent. Olivia looked toward the sky, worry tightening her face. Her bright green eyes, usually strong and observant, flickered with unease. "How bad?" "Bad enough that we need to reinforce everything," Ethan replied. Without needing a command, Rex bolted into action. The 5-year-old German shepherd moved with disciplined urgency, ears high, muscles taut, tail lowered with focus. His thick tan and black coat whipped in the rising wind as he sprinted to gather fallen branches, dragging them back toward the shelter they had built between two large boulders. Ethan had constructed it with sturdy driftwood beams and layers of dried fronds, but a storm of this magnitude meant they needed far more support. As Ethan worked, he gave Rex short, concise commands. "Bring it! Hold! Stay!" Rex obeyed perfectly, acting as if he were once again in the military, quick, precise, and fiercely loyal. Olivia, despite trembling hands, worked at Ethan's side. She tied branches together with vines, pushed stones against the base of the structure, and tightened the roof coverings to keep water out. Dirt smudged her arms and cheeks, and her blonde hair clung to her face in damp strands, yet she never complained. The storm struck just as they finished. A violent gust slammed into the shelter, nearly knocking Olivia off her feet. Rex darted to her side, pushing his body against her legs to steady her. Ethan pulled them both inside as sheets of freezing rain began to pound the island. Thunder rumbled like distant cannon fire. The wind howled through the trees like something alive. Inside the shelter, darkness surrounded them except for the dim flicker of a small fire Ethan had managed to shield between rocks. Olivia huddled close to Rex, her thin frame shaking under the onslaught of cold wind that seeped through every crack. Rex curled his large body around her, forming a living wall of warmth. His breathing remained steady, even as debris whipped against the outside of their shelter. Ethan sat on the opposite side, bracing his hands against the central beam to keep the structure from collapsing. Rain seeped through the patched roof, dripping steadily onto his shoulders, but he remained unmoving, a silent guardian keeping vigil through the storm. His silhouette, lit by the flickering firelight, looked carved from stone. Hours passed. The storm showed no mercy. Lightning split the sky, illuminating their small refuge in harsh, trembling flashes. In one violent gust, the entire shelter shook, and Olivia gasped, pressing her face against Rex's fur. Rex responded instantly, adjusting himself so that his body shielded her from the open side of the structure. His ears flattened, but his resolve never faltered. Ethan noticed, his jaw tightening with both pride and worry. "You're doing good, boy," he murmured over the roar. "Just hold on." By midnight, the storm reached its worst. Waves crashed loudly against the distant rocks, and parts of the forest seemed to groan under the pressure. Ethan didn't move from his position, even when his arms trembled with fatigue. Olivia watched him through tear-filled eyes, realizing just how much this man carried: responsibility, pain, duty, and a quiet compassion he never spoke aloud. When dawn finally broke, it did so quietly. The wind had softened to a gentle breeze. The rain had dwindled to scattered drops. The sun rose pale and weak through torn clouds. Ethan released the support beam with a long exhale, his shoulders sagging from exhaustion. Rex stretched, shaking droplets from his fur before nuzzling Olivia's cheek gently. Olivia looked around at the partially damaged shelter, then at Ethan and Rex, both exhausted but alive. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "If it weren't for Rex, I don't think I would have survived that." Ethan gave a tired smile, brushing wet sand off his hands. "That's just who he is. He saves the people he loves." Olivia froze. The words hung between them like a spark in dry tinder. Her green eyes softened, searching Ethan's face for something he wasn't sure he wanted to reveal. But it was there all the same, unspoken, fragile, undeniable. The storm outside had passed, but inside them, something new had begun to grow. The island had a strange way of blurring time. Days folded into each other with routines of survival, gathering wood, searching for food, repairing the shelter. But somewhere between the storms and the quiet nights by the fire, nearly 2 months slipped past. The sun was warmer now, the ocean calmer, and the trees fuller with late-season foliage. Yet the isolation never loosened its grip. Every morning, Ethan walked to the highest stretch of beach to check the giant SOS he had built from carefully arranged stones, their only beacon if a rescue ever came. Ethan had shaped each letter with meticulous precision. Large boulders formed the outlines, smaller stones filled the centers, all positioned in a cleared patch of pale sand, so that even from the air, the message would stand out sharply against the shoreline. It had taken him days to build, and he maintained it religiously. Olivia often joined him, carrying lighter stones despite her still healing wounds. Rex always stayed a few paces ahead or beside them, tail wagging lazily, but with alert eyes that never stopped scanning for danger. One morning, Olivia approached Ethan as he inspected the edges of the letters. She wore the same tattered clothes she had since the wreck, now patched in places with bark fibers and strips of Rex's old harness. Her blonde hair had grown wilder, sun-streaked and curling slightly from the humidity. Still, her green eyes held a newfound strength. "Think today's the day someone sees it?" she asked softly. Ethan sighed, brushing sand from his hands. "We hope for it. That's all we can do." Rex trotted up to Ethan with a worn stick in his mouth, an invitation to play. Ethan cracked a faint smile. "Even he's getting tired of waiting." Olivia laughed, a warm sound softened by the breeze. Just as Ethan reached for the stick, Rex stopped moving. His body stiffened from tail to nose. His ears shot up. He dropped the stick, barked once, sharply, then again, louder, looking upward. Ethan froze. A faint hum vibrated through the air, one that didn't belong to wind or waves. Olivia gasped. "Is that—" The hum grew louder, shifting into a rhythmic chop that rattled the leaves. A helicopter. Ethan's heart surged into his throat. "They're here!" Rex exploded into motion. The German Shepherd sprinted across the beach, barking fiercely at the sky, his body leaping with each bound. He darted around the SOS letters, tail high, barking toward the approaching aircraft as if trying to guide it in. The helicopter broke through the clouds, bright orange with rescue insignias on each side, its rotors chopping a furious beat against the air. The side door slid open mid-flight, revealing a figure leaning out. A man with dark sunglasses, a rugged jaw, and a hand gripping the cabin rail. This was Nathan Cole, the search team leader. Nathan was in his early 40s, tall and lean with broad shoulders that filled out his orange rescue jacket. His brown hair was short and tousled, streaked lightly with gray. Deep lines etched his forehead, a map of years spent in dangerous search and rescue missions. His eyes, hidden behind tinted lenses, were known among his team to be sharp and calculating, rarely missing anything. Nathan had lost his best friend during a rescue mission 5 years prior, a trauma that had left him colder, more rigid, but fiercely protective of anyone he managed to save. The helicopter hovered, scanning the beach. Nathan spotted the SOS first. Then he saw movement, Rex jumping and barking with the intensity of a flare. Nathan pointed downward, shouting into his headset, "Set us down! Survivors!" The pilot circled once before descending toward the open stretch of sand. Wind from the blades whipped the beach into a storm of dust and swirling debris. Ethan shielded Olivia with his body, bending slightly to keep her stable. Rex raced back toward them, barking over the roar. As the helicopter's skids touched the sand, Nathan hopped out with 2 rescuers behind him, both carrying medical packs. One was Elena Ruiz, a petite woman in her early 30s with warm brown skin, dark eyes, and a calm, composed demeanor. Elena had a background as a field medic, and her reassuring voice could steady even the most panicked survivor. The other was Logan Pierce, a tall, burly man with a thick brown beard and arms covered in protective tattoos. Despite his intimidating physique, Logan was gentle by nature, known for his soft-spoken kindness that contrasted with his rugged exterior. Rex stepped forward first, positioning himself between Ethan, Olivia, and the strangers. His ears flattened slightly with suspicion, and he emitted a low, warning growl, not aggressive, but protective. Nathan raised his hands slowly. "It's okay, boy," Nathan said. "We're here to help." Ethan placed a steady hand on Rex's neck. "It's all right, buddy. We're safe now." Rex paused, then eased back a step, tail lowering but still watchful. Only then did Nathan speak again, this time with certainty. "We're taking you home." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. Ethan felt his chest tighten. Rex's tail finally began to wag, tentative at first, then faster, as if the relief had finally broken through months of fear. They were saved. The return to civilization was louder, brighter, and far more overwhelming than Ethan expected. After weeks of nothing but ocean wind and the whisper of pine trees, the crowded coastal rescue center in Juneau felt like an entirely different universe. Helicopters thudded overhead, paramedics hurried between tents, and the crisp smell of disinfectant replaced the clean, earthy scent of the island. Yet amidst the chaos, one thing remained constant. Rex never strayed more than an arm's length from Ethan or Olivia, as if still afraid that someone might take them away. Olivia Bennett was quickly escorted to a medical tent for a full evaluation. Even in her worn, patched clothing and tangled, sun-bleached hair, she carried an effortless elegance. Her green eyes were brighter now, filled not with fear, but with relief. As doctors tended to her, she insisted on holding onto Rex's collar with one hand, refusing to let him be taken for separate examination until she saw Ethan step through the tent flap. "Go with them," Ethan reassured her softly. "I'm not going anywhere." Only then did she release Rex, and the dog allowed a medic to check him over. Rex tolerated the man's touch with mild irritation, a big, muscular German shepherd who clearly felt he had more important things to do than be poked and prodded. His thick coat was brushed out, revealing new scars Ethan hadn't noticed before, marks of branches, rocks, and battles fought silently in the wilderness. The medic, a middle-aged man named Dr. Samuel Boyd, broad-shouldered, salt and pepper beard, and a kind but tired expression, commented gently, "He's been through a war out there." His voice carried the empathy of someone who had seen many rescues, and perhaps too many losses. Ethan stroked Rex's neck, fingers brushing over the scars. He always has been a fighter. Meanwhile, Olivia remained seated on a cot, fidgeting with the fabric of her blanket. Once cleared, she requested to speak with the authorities. She needed to know who survived. An officer brought her a digital list, names of passengers and crew, all accounted for. All except one, Captain Harris. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered Harris's stern voice echoing over the ship's speakers, the old captain who chose duty over escape. Olivia pressed a hand against her lips, her shoulders trembling slightly. He stayed with the ship." Her whisper held grief but also deep respect. Rex nudged her knee gently, offering comfort the way only a dog could. The following days passed in a blur of interviews, medical checks, and overwhelming attention. Olivia received dozens of calls from lawyers, reporters, and board members from her corporation, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate she had inherited far too young. Her life, once marked by rigid schedules and board meetings, now felt impossibly distant. Meanwhile, Ethan and Rex were cleared to leave. But before parting ways with Olivia, Ethan insisted she rest first. On the morning of his departure, he walked quietly toward the parking area, Rex trotting beside him. Olivia caught up just as he opened the truck door. Her hair was clean now, braided loosely over one shoulder, her clothes replaced with simple jeans and a soft sweater borrowed from the rescue staff. Yet none of this changed the softness in her gaze when she looked at Ethan. "So," she said, trying to sound casual, "you're really going back to Montana?" "It's home," Ethan replied. "Quiet, peaceful, a good place for Rex." He glanced down at the dog, whose tongue lolled out happily, until the moment he realized Ethan was preparing to leave. Before Ethan could climb in, Rex suddenly hopped up onto Olivia's lap, planting his front paws across her legs and leaning his head against her shoulder. It was a move he normally reserved only for Ethan, a rare display of affection. Olivia laughed through sudden tears. "Even Rex doesn't want me to go." Ethan froze. Rex looked back at him with soulful amber eyes, tail wagging slowly, as if urging his human to understand something he couldn't say. And Ethan did understand. Olivia stepped closer, gently placing a hand on Rex's back and another on Ethan's arm. "I don't want to go either," she admitted softly. "I spent years running a company that never really felt like mine, but the last 2 months, they did. You did. Rex did. That island gave me something I didn't know I needed." Ethan swallowed hard, emotions tightening his voice. "Olivia, your world is not the world I want anymore," she interrupted. "My brother can run the company. He's ready. And I—" She looked into Ethan's eyes, unguarded. "I want a life that feels real, even if it's in a tiny cabin in Montana." Rex barked once, as if casting the final vote. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head slightly. "Guess I've been overruled." Olivia smiled, radiant and relieved. "Good, because I'm not leaving without you two." That afternoon, they left the rescue center together, Ethan driving, Olivia in the passenger seat, and Rex stretched happily across both of their laps, finally content. The road ahead was long, but for the first time since the shipwreck, it felt like they were heading not just toward safety, but toward home. The soldier, the woman who gave everything away, and the loyal dog who brought their hearts together. Sometimes, God's miracles don't arrive with thunder or bright light from the sky. Sometimes, they come quietly, in the form of a loyal dog who never gives up, a soldier who refuses to walk away, or a woman who discovers the courage to choose love over fear. On that deserted island, Ethan, Olivia, and Rex were never truly alone. In every crashing wave, in every cold night they survived, in every moment they held on to each other, there was a guiding hand, gentle, silent, and divine. It's a reminder for all of us. God sends miracles in the people we meet, the animals who love us, and the moments that change our lives forever. Sometimes the greatest blessings come from the darkest storms, and as we step back into our daily lives, into our jobs, our worries, our routines, may we remember that hope often arrives in unexpected forms. We should hold on to the people who lift us up, cherish the loyal companions by our side, and trust that God can turn even our hardest trials into something beautiful. If this story touched your heart, I kindly invite you to share it with someone who might need hope today. Please leave a comment about your thoughts or a prayer for someone you're thinking of. And if you'd like more stories filled with faith, love, and miracles, remember to subscribe to the channel. May God bless you, protect your family, and guide your steps, just as He guided Ethan, Olivia, and Rex toward each other.